Welcome to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. I'm Andeea, a licensed addiction counselor, and along with my co-host, Laura Kissmann, a quantum nutritionist, we will be inviting expert scientists, clinicians, survivors, and thrivers to distill their pearls of wisdom attained from applying quantum biology to their fields of research and everyday lives. Our goal is to bring you easy to understand principles and practices about the study of light, water, and magnetism so you can take your health into your own hands. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. Today on the podcast, we have Carrie Bennett, who is near and dear to both me and Laura, because Carrie was a part of our journey in learning all about quantum biology. So, Carrie, I'm just going to have you introduce yourself, tell people a little bit about what you do, and then I'd also like you to share a little bit about your story, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. Well, first thing, thank you so much for having me, you two, because we go back in terms of our learning journey together. And so I'm so thrilled to chat with you both today. So quantum biology, how did I get into it? Who am I? Interesting questions, right? I mean, I can probably say this confidently that none of us really anticipated getting into quantum biology when we first started our learning journeys, perhaps. But I got into it because I had my own health challenges, and I've been working with clients for quite some time as well. I've got a background in undergraduate studies in microbiology and neurobiology. I went to massage therapy school, graduate studies in nutrition. I own my own fitness studio where I've got certifications for personal training and all sorts of fitness modalities. And I came to a point in my life where I was struggling. And I started to see clients who are also struggling. And in spite of doing everything perfect when it came to diet, when it came to movement, even when it came to things like massage and breathing mechanics and things like that, just wasn't enough, right? Just wasn't enough. And so I had this nagging feeling that something was missing in my, in what the human body needed to optimize health. And so that's when I was just kind of scrolling and putting in random search terms and found the work of Dr. Jack Kruse. And he pointed me in the direction of quantum biology, highlighting so many great researchers who I just had no idea. I didn't know this was a thing until I knew it was a thing. And as soon as I knew this was a thing, I started to learn about water and light and nature and the quantum field and our biofields and all these things, that we can talk about when it comes to quantum biology. And I started to apply certain strategies, and it was just the biggest game changer for me, for my clients, for clinical practice. So now I'm in clinical practice still. I see fewer, or I should say my schedule has space for fewer one-on-one clients these days. I still love working one-on-one with clients. But that being said, now I get to work with people in more of a community-based aspect. So I've got an online community where we talk all about quantum biology and how to apply it. I've got my Instagram space, my newsletters, my videos, and things like that. So that's what I'm doing now. And I'm so thrilled because I get to teach this stuff to practitioners like you as well. And that's such a fun part of my work week.
Carrie, one of the ways I think some of us came to this as well, along, initially Dr. Jack Kruse, we've mentioned that in other podcasts, but was finding your Instagram. I just want to highlight that for people because your Instagram, not only did you have the best graphics, but it's the explanations. And I actually have, I like taken the time to copy them, put them into documents. And I've given them as homework to read for clients, that the keener clients, that
Cool.
really want to dive deep. And I think having those special graphics, it just really helped a lot of us learn on top of the courses that we've taken. So I just want to share that and inspire people to go to Instagram to Carrie. It's Carrie B Wellness.
Carrie B Wellness. Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Those graphics are so fun to make. I get to make those graphics like when I'm waiting in the parking lot at school pickup. It's like, what can I design really quickly, do the best you can. So it's been fun. It's been a fun part. I've been so left-brained a lot of my life in terms of like analytical and logical, but I used to be an artist too. And that actually has allowed me to, I did art all throughout high school. I painted up until I had children. I painted regularly. And so these graphics are almost like me diving back into that aspect of my brain.
Expressing that.
Exactly.
So today we really we would love to pick your brain on, everything, right? All of our clients' questions, and challenges, our own health challenges. But we're really gonna try and stick to water because it is one of the three pillars, and our listeners really haven't heard much on the topic. So I guess our first question would be, why do you consider water to be one of the three pillars of quantum biology?
Well, I think once you understand that the water that we're talking about when it comes to the water inside of our bodies, it has really special properties compared to when we just look at water in a glass. And so I think what would be a really interesting thing would be to break down how that water actually is inside of us, why it's different than when we think of just hydration or water, and then what we can do to support it, because it does so many things for us that I never knew about. I'm not sure about you, but anytime I would open a biology textbook, it would be something along the lines of a cell cut in half, and yeah, there's like blue stuff, there's water inside of the cell, but no one ever talked about the fact that anything beyond that, yes, there's that hydration is there, there's water inside of the cell, there's water around the cell, but it doesn't do anything, right? It was considered very much just inert, maybe packing material even. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And as you two know, that water in our bodies actually exists in what Dr. Gerald Pollack considers a fourth state of water, meaning we know water as a solid, we know water as a liquid, and we know water as a gas, like a vapor. But what he found is that the water inside of our bodies and inside of our cells actually kind of exists in this liquid crystalline state, but just right between what a true liquid behaves in terms of water and what the ice, the solid, behaves like. And so that liquid crystalline state of water that he termed EZ, or exclusion zone water, he tested it for so many different properties. And we now know that we can actually truly get energy from that water. And I don't know about you, but that was a game changer for me, because my assumption was that the only way I was ever able to get energy for my body was through the food that I ate. And to understand that the water inside of me actually was a source of potential energy to run all of my cellular programs. And I learned how to there's ways that we can optimize it. Mind blowing, right? Mind blowing in terms of how empowering that is to understand.
Okay, so you covered part of a slide that Andy and I found on the paradigm shifts with water. So the first one being, we always thought it came in three phases, and now we know it has this fourth phase. And then the second one, I think you covered that it's not just there, it doesn't. The old paradigm was that it didn't play a significant role, but the new paradigm is that it's a foundational role, right, in both energy. And then we do want to get to that communication piece, so hold that
Love it.
thought for us. Okay. And the third one that you've taught us is to hydrate. You don't just have to drink a lot of water. And I actually have a client ask me yesterday, like, Laura, like, what is the right amount of water, and how much water do I drink? And then I found myself, asking her a bunch more questions. Well, what is your source of water? And turns out it was tap. So she's drinking like 12 glasses of tap water a day, and then the rest with black tea with the same tap water. So love for you to share just this idea of what is the paradigm shift with hydrating in terms of having to drink all this water. What's another way to hydrate the body?
Yeah, sure. So I do view hydration through the lens of three different things, right? So three different sub pillars. One
Okay.
would be yes. I mean, we do ultimately need to drink some water. The vast majority of people are not able to produce mitochondria super effectively inside of their mitochondria, which we're going to talk about in a second. So water consumption is important, but it is by no means the only way that we hydrate. And in fact, it really only maintains the hydration of our blood, right? That blood volume hydration is an important signal, right? We don't want to be dehydrated there, because that can signal a general stress response and actually an inflammatory kind of cascade that can happen in the body. But to be truly hydrated inside of our cells, it requires the two additional strategies, which would be to optimize the water that our mitochondria make for us, which they do, right? They make really good quality water inside of our cells. And then number two would be to maintain this exclusion zone water. So the mitochondria make it. What can we do to actually maintain water in that exclusion zone state, which we can talk about as well? And as you know, that involves light, specifically infrared light. And so when we apply those three pillars to hydration, it gets a more complete viewpoint of hydration. There are some additional sub pillars that we can talk about, always, like mineral status and things like that. but it's by no means not just the water that we drink, and the quality of the water that we drink absolutely matters these days, because unfortunately the vast majority of us, the water that's coming to us into our houses through our municipal tap supply is just unfortunately full of toxins.
Right. Yeah, which I talked to her and gave her a couple strategies, but okay, before we go to the perfect glass of water, I want to just go back and make sure the listeners really understand easy water.
Sure.
Easy water has a bunch of different names. I know a few, like interfacial. I don't know if it's how you say it. I've heard it gel water. Is there
Cold
any other
water.
names? Any other names you can think of?
Sure. Yes. I mean, it's been referred to as easy water, interfacial water, biological water,
Biological.
structured water, coherent water. That's the unfortunate thing about this, because you have different researchers talking about the exact same thing, but they're studying it in different tissues of the body, different organs, different cell types, and they're calling it different names. And so unfortunately, I had to do a ton of digging when it came to getting into the research to recognize that these people are all talking about the same thing. Only when it's in collagen, they call it this. And when it's in the cells, they call it this. And so it's called a lot of different names. I prefer just easy or exclusion zone water, because I think when you dive into that work from Dr. Jerry Pollack, you start to see all of the cool things that water can do for us.
And he's written a couple books. Maybe we should mention those.
Sure, sure. And they're interesting. I love I love all of his books. And actually he's got like 4 more behind. I was talking with him behind the
Oh,
scenes at this conference, and he's got like 4 more coming out. One's on consciousness, one's on the true structure of the atom. Like super cool stuff coming out there. So
wow.
the 2 books that I most highly recommend when it comes to this, the first one would be The Fourth Phase of Water. Really gives you some interesting graphics. His son does all of his graphics for him. And
Oh,
so really gives you some interesting illustrations on what we're talking about. And yes, lots of scientific language as well, but not necessarily for the layperson to super easily understand. But I encourage anyone who's interested in this to try to kind of work your way through it, because it's a fascinating book. And before that book, he wrote one that really got me even more interested in this, and that was called Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life, meaning that these cells have this gelled-like water, and that gelled-like water actually behaves like an engine. It gives us energy. And so that was kind of his precursor to the fourth phase of water.
okay. So easy. Let's stick on that because it's so important for people to know about. One thing I think I've maybe have heard from you, or it might have been Dr. Jack Cruz or somebody, but when surgeons do surgery, or someone has an injury, water doesn't spray out of the body, right? It's like this, it's not even that we see this jello like phase, but did you mention that it forms near
Forms everywhere. Yeah.
everywhere? And how does it form? Like, yeah.
Yeah, and so this is a great time to kind of take a look at that. And so when we look at this easy water, it forms next to all biological surfaces, water-loving biological surfaces, which is pretty much every surface that you're going to find inside of the cell, around the cell, inside of blood vessels, right? All of those surfaces love water, thankfully, because by percentage, we're about 60 to 70% water. But the number that really blew my mind was by molecular count. If I were to line up all the molecules in my body in just straight lines and count them, 99 out of every 100 would be water. And the reason being is that water is so tiny, right? Compared to like glucose or these big proteins, water is so tiny. And that water can kind of fit in its way around everything. And it turns out that when water fits next to these biological surfaces, it organizes how it interacts with other water molecules, and it forms a structure to it, which is very key. So let's take liquid water in a glass. If I were to look at those H2O molecules, and I always do this for H2O with oxygen at the top and then 2 hydrogens at the bottom. If I were to look at H2O molecules in the liquid state, I would see those water molecules kind of randomly interacting with other water molecules. There's not a lot of structure to it. If I were to see that those same water molecules in ice, it would be very organized. They would look like hexagonal arrangements, but it'd be very rigid, right? That's solid, that's hard. Turns out that the water inside of our bodies organizes itself into that very structured hexagonal pattern in terms of how it interlocks with other water molecules, but it still maintains like a fluidity to it, a gel-like softness to it, which is the water inside of us. And unlike the liquid or unlike water in the frozen state, when you actually kind of do what I would call chemistry math in terms of counting up the protons, the positive charges in the water, and the electrons, which are the negative charges in this water here that we're talking about, it turns out that that water is negatively charged. So that water is unlike liquid water in a glass that's neutral. And so this water that forms now inside of us, next to all of our biological surfaces, has this structure to it that's negatively charged. And so this structure itself is what Dr. Pollack called exclusion zone. Because literally, because of this arrangement of the water molecules, things can't penetrate it. So we're talking about if a cell has a lot of intracellular toxicity, those toxins could get in because of lack of exclusion zone water. Liquid water, that bulk state of water, but things can get in, right? Things can penetrate and kind of wreak havoc. Exclusion zone water is almost like our own little force field so that we can't allow those toxins in. And if we have the toxins in, we can actually improve our exclusion zone water to push them out, to get rid of them from the cells. And not only that, but as that water structured itself into that cool hexagonal arrangement, in order for it to become negatively charged, it had to kick out a positive charge because otherwise it would have been neutral, right? It would be like water in a glass. So it kicked out that positive charge, and that positive charge alignment happens, a line of positive charge happens right next to this negative charge. So here you've got your biological surface, negatively charged EZ exclusion zone water, a positively charged area called the proton zone. And Dr. Pollack showed that you could stick a little electrode, which is a tiny little, almost like a little needle attached to a wire in each of them, connect it to a light bulb, and it would light a light bulb. Meaning we are getting true legitimate energy from this water. The charge separation, where you separate the negative and the positive charge, is the same reason why a battery, you take a look at any battery, and it has a positive end and a negative end. And when you connect it into a circuit, aka an array of proteins or enzymes or a chain reaction that needs to take place, the energy can flow, right? It flows from the negative to the positive, and it causes the cell can then derive work from it. So that's what's happening inside of us. And I was never taught. I mean, I did, at least 15 years of schooling and higher education. And I never learned of this stuff in terms of what could happen. And so it just blew my mind, as soon as I found this. And it was just like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense to me. And it's an untapped source of how to support human physiology and human health. And the even cooler part about this is that the way to support those exclusion zone water levels is so simple. Because what Dr. Pollack showed is that there are things that can shrink the exclusion zone, meaning drain our energy. And there's things that can expand the exclusion zone or charge this battery inside of us. And the things that charge it up the main thing would be infrared light. All light can charge it, but infrared light especially will charge that up. And sunlight always contains at least 40 to 50% infrared light, regardless of whether it's sunny, cloudy, hot, cold. It's like we can literally go outside and we soak in this light, that those infrared wavelengths of light penetrate deep into our bodies, and they charge our water battery. And if we didn't have access to it from sunlight, what would we have had access to? Campfire, right? And then we have and there's also a lot of more northern and colder latitudes that have a tradition of sauna. And so you see that we knew almost instinctively that these things, we needed that warmth in the winter when maybe the infrared was a little lacking compared to the summer. But either way, it's really easy for us to access sources of infrared and charge that water battery back up when that energy gets depleted.
You have it was a post that I think has become it's become a famous quote in the quantum biology world, which is, you are a battery made of water charged by sunlight, something like that.
That's exactly what it
Did I get
is.
it right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I got it Jerry Pollack approved when I spoke with him last.
Whoa.
So yeah, we are, right? Doesn't it make sense that water organizes itself into a battery? That battery is made out of water, right? And it's charged by sunlight. So to me, that means that lack of sunlight is by far one of the things that can cause our cells to become dysfunctional. Because if that cell becomes drained of energy, it can't run all of its tasks. And if it can't run all of its tasks, it has to pick and choose just the most, pertinent things to run. It can't run all of its, I want to tidy up this, or I need to take care of this, but no, we don't have the energy for that. So it's only going to run just the few programs that it absolutely needs, but that's not a cell that's in a thriving state of health. So if we can charge that energy back up by charging that exclusion zone water, all of a sudden this cell now can run all of its tasks.
So, okay, back to the easy water.
Sorry, I
Would
got a
you
fly flying
consider?
over here. I had open
Good,
windows. Go away, fly.
good, good, good. It's that time of year. You're getting your infrared, right?
Right.
Okay, good question. Carrie, can you get infrared through a window, through an open window, or through a window and through a screen?
Through an open window and a screen, absolutely. Through a closed window, especially modern window glass, no, it's going to be lacking, because that's how modern window glass was designed, right? It was designed for energy efficiency, meaning it's not going to want the infrared to let the infrared in, because it's going to change how much energy the building needs to use to either heat up or likely cool down the space.
Okay, so another area of easy water, a property of easy water, I guess two things. I've heard, I think from you, that it's a semiconductor of electrons. We can consider it that. Okay.
Yeah.
And with easy water, my understanding from you and now other places is that it traps EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies. Why is that a special property? And then what can go also wrong with that? Maybe you'll understand how can it backfire with some other EMFs? Could you
Yeah,
talk about that a little
absolutely.
bit? Okay.
Yeah, so I think to understand this, like how water can trap anything or interact with any frequencies like that, vibrational frequencies like that, you have to recognize that water, when it organizes itself into that state, it becomes what's called a liquid crystal. And so liquid crystals have been used for a long time in physics research as antenna, as an ability that have the ability to actually store data and memory. And so it means that this water inside of our bodies all of a sudden takes on such a more profound role than just energy. Energy alone is massive. But now we know that this water is literally trying to pull in electromagnetic frequencies to sense our environment. Now, here, okay, I'll go here, because I mean, I know you two get this, and I hope the listeners will be able to follow along with this, but we have to be able to sense our environment beyond just our five senses, sight, touch, taste, smell. We have to be able to sense other aspects of our environment. And one of the things that we have to be aware of is that our environment is actually full of invisible energy. What invisible energy? Well, the best example would be, I give you a radio right now, and you turn on FM radio, and you can tune it until that antenna picks up that radio station, and you can all of a sudden hear the baseball game, listen to the rock music, whatever it is, right? And so we know that we're bathing in invisible energy, and there's ways that we can tap into it. The water inside of us is that antenna as well, because we would need to have known, like, okay, what is there a potential threat in my environment? We literally know that, has anyone ever walked into a room or like into a place, and you get this vibe, and you're like, there's something here that doesn't quite feel right,
Yeah.
and or the other way around, right? Instead, you can say something along the lines of, oh, this feels like a really joyful place, right? I really enjoy being here. Well, that's not necessarily what I saw. It's not necessarily what I smelled or tasted or heard. It's just this sense, the sensation, the sixth sense. That's the water. That's the water interpreting that vibrational information and then allowing our physiology to either respond with, oh, all is copacetic, let's enjoy, versus rut-row, let's get the heck out of here, because it seems like it's threatening in this environment. And so that then begs the question of, okay, if my water can do this, then what frequencies and vibrations and EMFs, as you talked about, am I surrounding myself with? And there's two ways that we can do that. We can surround ourselves with we can think about the EMFs that come from nature, right? Those would be things like sunlight. Natural sunlight's an electromagnetic frequency. Nature, also, the earth provides a frequency that's called the Schumann resonance. That it's basically this beat that happens at about 7 to 8 hertz that happens due to lightning strikes. So anywhere on the planet at any given moment, there's massive amounts of lightning being discharged from the atmosphere to the surface of the earth. And that creates a low frequency sound that we can't hear, that bounces back and forth between that atmosphere and the surface. That's been around literally since the earth has started. And that range, that frequency that it creates, it's the alpha range of our brainwaves, which is really where we're like, so that means our default mode is calm creative. That's the default mode of the human brain. Unfortunately, these days, though, we're surrounded by a lot of non-native or non-earth generated electromagnetic frequencies, such as those coming from that cell phone tower, or my Wi-Fi radiation, or my Bluetooth headset, or my Alexa speakers and things, right? And while I don't want to provide any sort of fear into people, because we all want to be able to enjoy modern living, I think it's important for people to recognize that those vibrations are so fast and so aggressive compared to the vibrations we would be getting from sunlight, and that we would be getting from things like the Schumann resonance. And that when our water senses an excessive amount of those, the body turns on a stress signal. And that stress signal can affect the mitochondria's ability to make more water as well. And so it becomes a vicious cycle. And so that's where I tell people that if you are experiencing any form of low level anxiety or high, like anxiety, high level or low level, if you have a nervous system that has a very hard time regulating itself, you really have to get out into the natural signals more frequently. You have to ground your feet to the earth, or hands, right? Bare skin to the earth, because in the same reason that a radio station grounds its antenna so the signal becomes stronger, we're designed to be grounded into the earth so we can connect to the Schumann resonance more strongly. Right. And that when we do that, we kind of discharge all the noise that we've picked up in that water, in that exclusion zone water, from the Bluetooth, or even listening to that news, right? That was all negative and nasty, right? That telling me to fear this and be aware of that. All that I can actually discharge into the earth. I can discharge that static or that noise in the water and tune into signal, the Schumann resonance, calm that brainwave state, which is why earthing has been shown to balance HRV, which is a measurement of our nervous system regulation, within seconds. Seconds. And so it's, again, another powerful way to understand how that water in our body operates as an antenna, but the simple steps that we can take to actually support connecting to those signals that provide a sense of safety.
I love how, Carrie, how you're taking, we were only going to talk about one pillar today, but you are showing how they're so interconnected.
They're all
and
interconnected.
How, yeah, interconnected, and they all benefit and work symbiotically to help our health. Okay. Something I have to add for the listeners who are just listening to this on podcast apps. I don't know if Carrie has any French in her background, but I'm a Canadian, and we have a province called Quebec. And so our French Canadians, they talk with their hands, and Carrie really talks with her hands. So you need to go back to that part where she's talking about easy water, because you're actually, you really showed the hydrogen circles, and yeah, you're gonna have to watch it on the YouTube called Quantum Healthy.
I lived in France for a little while, but I don't know, maybe I picked it up there. I think I've always just been a hand talker.
And then I wanted to just add, you listed a whole bunch of sources of EMFs. That's a huge particular interest of mine. And one that I just want to mention to add to that list is cell phones.
Cell phones.
And they're adding this, I love the way you really described it. But another way that I usually explain it is just the signal to noise ratio is too low. So there's too much noise. And then our mitochondria, and that sense, that organ, that sensing, can't sense the signals that we really need. So
yeah. Then another interesting thing too is that when we don't have adequate exclusion zone water, it's hard to sense the correct signals as well. Yeah. So there's this idea of too much bulk water also being this damping effect too, that the water that's not structured and organized. And so that's another thing that I think of as well. It's like we want to have a strong antenna, but then we want to connect that liquid crystalline antenna to the correct signals. Both of those things are so important. And then I also don't want to rush over really quickly the fact that this is why our thoughts matter as well, and who we surround ourselves with, and what we choose to engage with. It's why I've drawn many boundaries in relationships, things like that, because it's been now that I know that this water is listening, even when I don't know it, even when I don't realize it's listening, it's just changed my relationship with my own self-talk. It's changed my relationship, like I said, with how I choose to engage with media. Even though I run a business on social media, I'm disengaged in a way where I can read something but not react, right? Because I used to be a reactor. I got to prove myself. I got to argue with this person. I can't do that. Like that doesn't serve me, because I know that my water is responding to that, and that's then dictating the health of my cells. And so it's really given me an awareness that I never had before about how I engage with the world.
I love that you said that, Carrie. This is something that I teach in my community for people in recovery. And you've mentioned already like so many crossovers and parallels with our actually stopped cussing so much. I was quite the potty mouth, but now I'm always like, well, if I say the F word, I just imprinted it on my water and it's getting confused and I don't want to do that. So, I took and I recommend people take your classes. I took your hydration course, and I'm maybe mucking up the name here, but it's hydration easy class or
Masterclass?
easy master.
Yeah.
Anyway, when I was done with it, I had wrote down like my takeaway, and I wanted to just share it with you. And would you say, and then you also added to my quote while you've been chatting here with us. So would you say that water is a steward for the language, the communication, and the protection of our body?
100%, right? 100% it is. Water's an unbiased observer, right? It's there to connect us, right? It's there to connect us to the information that we cannot sense. And it's going to do that, like I said, in a very neutral way. Water doesn't judge. It's just literally going to organize itself and structure itself based on the information that it's receiving. So water absolutely is a very non-judgmental steward. Water always seeks coherence or structure. It doesn't want, so for example, let's say I say something mean to my body. It's like, oh, look at your, legs, abdomen, whatever, like hair, right? Oh, yes. Yes, my water is hearing that, but at the same time, water wants the structure. So water is looking and seeking for the positive or the beneficial energies for me. So it's not like, screw it, I ruined my water for the day, I might as well just bash myself the rest of the day, right? It's like, no, water is actually looking to go back into that alignment and that harmony. And the way that really works in our bodies is it can change things like how our DNA is expressed. I can say, oh, let's optimize your genes for a healthy cell, or let's change your proteins and your receptors for hormones so that it's ready for you to thrive today, right? Water can literally change the shape of proteins and receptors and DNA to optimize things for us. And so, and it's always seeking coherence. And so, yes, I emote. Are you kidding me? On the basketball court, if someone does me dirty, you undercut me on the basketball court, I can't help but say something. But at the same time, I do know like healthy expressions of emotion are a very important thing, right? A very important thing. And at the same time, we can recover that water and that coherence very quickly, because we have the water seeking that coherent energy and information that we're providing it.
Okay, this leads us into another section we do want to talk to you about. We've got more questions, but this one we have to bring up because you did highlight a lot of both their work. You said the word emote, which made me think Dr. Emoto and Veda Austin,
Yeah, sure.
two people. Can you talk a little bit about what they've done with ICE and messaging and what they have learned, and again how you've brought it into, it sounds like you're sharing already how you're using it, but the consciousness of water.
Yeah, sure. So it was Masaru Emoto's work that really first got me so intrigued about how water is almost listening, right? Water's responding. And what Dr. Emoto, he's written many books, the hidden messages in water is a great one, but he's written many books. And what he did was he essentially froze water droplets after exposing them to different sources of words, sounds, music. And through how the water either organized itself into a crystal, like a beautiful, like the ideal structure of water is a hexagon. Think about snowflakes. It's got hexagons with little branches coming out that have hexagons on them, right? And so if water can organize itself into those beautiful hexagonal style crystals, that means that water has gained structure. And when water gains structure, it gains energy. This is a separate researcher. This is Dean Radin and Konstantin Karat, two amazing researchers as well. So as that water gains structure, we now know that water has more and more energetic capacity to donate to us or to enhance the water that's already inside of us. when he wrote water or spoke to water words of love, gratitude, joy, music that was subjectively pleasing to him, he found that that water was very ready to organize itself into these beautiful hexagonal crystals. And you can see many, many images of this online if you Google it. Contrarily, when he would speak words of negativity and fear and hatred, I loathe you, right? When he would speak those sorts of things to the water actually would either form very amorphous crystals or almost would just look like a blob, like nothing would form, which is then synonymous with lack of energy, lack of information that's in that water. And so then it's beautiful work. He's been criticized, unrightly so, because he only allowed like-minded individuals into his lab. And so they said, oh, you're trying to control the experiment, you're trying to influence your experiments, but he knew how responsive water was. So he knew he needed to have other people who had the same appreciation for water as he did to go into his lab to be able to notice these differences, because otherwise the experiments might have been confounded by other people's negativity. Now, that being said, his work has been taken another step further by Veda Austin, who's just such a lovely, amazing researcher when it comes to water. What she does is she takes petri dishes of water and exposes them to not only words, but to sounds, to thoughts, to images. She puts tears in them. People, I don't know if she has, but people have sent samples of urine, right? And the people have done their own urine samples and have flash frozen it using her technique. And you can learn her technique on her website. I believe it's just vedaAustin.com. She's got a brand new book out, which is great too. And what you'll start to see is very similar, but instead of looking at the tiny microscopic water samples that Emoto looked at, you see now in a petri dish how the water responds and organizes itself. And so it will literally create, when it's flash frozen, it will literally create images in the water in response to the energy or the image or the information that it's receiving. And the even cooler part of this is that she found what are called hydroglyphs, which are like, instead of hieroglyphs, hydroglyphs. So like water images that are consistently appearing in water in response to the same input. So you could write the word love in English, you could write the word love in Italian, you could say the word love, or you could feel love. And all of a sudden that water, when it flash freezes, it'll show that hydroglyph for love. So that means that water is responding to the vibrational component of the word, the thought, the image, regardless of the language, right, that it's spoken in. And that then water is basically repeating back that it's heard that, and that's how it's organizing itself. So when you start to see how responsive water is, it's just mind-blowing, but so cool at the same time. And if we're 99% water by molecular count, we're equally responsive and influenced by those things as well.
It makes you wonder the implications of this knowledge as people say more and more people start, find out how to do this petri dish and can learn from and really see that waters can give these messages and is listening. What would that do for the planet if we could all realize the consciousness that we could rise to? I find that really exciting, actually.
Well, it's super exciting because this explains distance healing, right? What I mean, and this has been proven in research as well. It's like I can send healing intention across the planet, and it can be instantaneously received by someone. Now we have a medium that connects us that's also behaves like water, called the ether. That's a different topic, but we've got this. We're part of what's this invisible field around us, and that penetrates us is this ether, this quantum field. And so my intentions zip through this quantum field or this ether to, let's say, you or you, and all of a sudden that can beautifully structure the water inside of you. And that's been shown in lots of research to happen in terms of the water itself is being influenced by that intention. And so, yeah, it just means that my thoughts matter, right? My words matter, not just to myself, but to who I'm around or just who I'm connected to. Because the other aspect of this quantum biology is that we're all entangled. You and I, we're all entangled because we've interacted, and so entanglement just means that what I do not influences just not only myself, but the people who I've interacted with in this world. And there's people I've interacted with in this world that have maybe just sat in an airplane next to me, or maybe just, sat behind me at the movie theater, right? But things like that means that what I say and what I do is far more profound than I ever realized. And so that's why I choose to, as best as I possibly can, with all the human faults that I have, default to compassion whenever possible. Because I do know how important that is to have that as my general state. Now, there's podcast number 2 is how compassion implodes life force energy into our bodies through the ether. That's a completely separate podcast.
Okay, we're booking you now, Carrie, for that one.
You'll be
But it
back.
matter. Well, I'm excited. But I mean, there you go. It's just way more profound. And not only us, but think about, if it's fascinating too, right? We're 70%-ish water by percentage. Mother Earth is 70% water, right, by percentage. And so it means like we're basically just a smaller fractal of what's happening with the earth. And if the earth contains all this water, and water is a responsive antenna, that water is listening to our collective human thoughts as well. And Masaru Emoto actually showed that polluted water that had been horribly polluted, when he first tested a sample of it, it showed no structure whatsoever. Then he gathered up about half a dozen healers, priests, to go to say prayers over that water. And after that water had been prayed over, the water all of a sudden started to form crystals again. And so it means that we are, connected not only through this ether and through entanglement, but through the waters of the planet as well. It's
I guess
cool.
they're all connected too.
They're all
I've been just on this theme, I live very close to a very shallow lake. It's like at deepest, it's like 30 feet. And I swim in it. And by August, because it gets so warm, it can get kind of kind of mucky and algae. But anyway, what I've been doing, I know your massage therapy background, as am I. And so before, a lot of times before I would do a treatment, on a person, I put my hands like on their head or on their sacrum and just kind of hold and then kind of send a nice blessing. And so I've started that before I'm training for a swim, a 3K swim. And I put my hands on the surface of the water, and I think about Dr. Emoto and all those priests. And I just, I actually ask for the health of the water, yeah. And who knows
amazing.
if that's connecting all over, now that you've explained that, all over the world.
You're healing all the water everywhere.
So another huge question we have to ask you, there's kind of the water that we make and the water that we take. Can you kind of give us some ideas on how to make the perfect, the water that we take, meaning what we drink, to how to make the perfect glass of water?
Yeah, sure.
I know that's a whole podcast in itself.
Oh, but it's great. We can break it down a little bit, at least,
Okay.
to say like, number one, we have to do the best job we can with filtering our water, right? And I don't want to put any budgetary limitations on that, because you just do the best you can, whether it's a Berkey filter or whether it's a whole house reverse osmosis or distillation. So reverse osmosis and distillation really do remove all the impurities from the water, especially the chemical toxins that are pretty pervasive these days. But do the best you can, right, to remove the toxins, because those toxins will impact our ability to form exclusion zone water in the first place. It'll impact the ability of our mitochondria to make that water for us, right? So there's a lot of implications by being able to just eliminate toxins for what we ingest. So step one is filter. Step two would be remineralize. Add a little tiny bit of minerals back to water, because we never would have found distilled water in a natural spring, right? That water coming from a natural spring would have been not full, but would have had trace amounts of minerals in it. And those minerals, while they don't necessarily contribute to, the mineral status of my body, they're not a massive source of minerals by any means. They actually make the water better absorbed, right? I don't know about you too, but I've had countless clients who would come to me and it's like, well, I'm drinking 12 glasses of water a day of reverse osmosis water, and it just flushes right through them, right? It's like, I still have dry skin, dry hair. I just feel like, I'm constipated, right? All of those signals of dry skin, right? It's like, so that water is, yes, you're drinking water, but how are you absorbing that water? So, my rule of thumb is, in general, I'll use both ounces, and it's about 300 milliliters / let's say 10-ish ounces of water. Here's just a little bit of trace minerals, right? A little thing of trace minerals. You can dissolve, you can even dissolve your own high quality sea salt, like Celtic sea salt, in water and do the same thing. But literally in that type of a glass, I might add 2 drops of this, right? Like in that full glass. So we're not talking about making the water taste salty in any capacity, but we are talking about how those minerals and the charge around those minerals pulls that water better into our bloodstream. And that's where we start that hydration process.
Just before you go further, could I just ask, if you, let's say someone has tap water and they're stuck, they're at a restaurant or whatever, is it still worth it to put those minerals in the tap water to make it more absorbable? Or
Yeah, you know, whenever I'm exposed to tap water, I say a blessing.
okay.
Right? It's like, may my body take what is nourishing from this water and leave the rest, or
Okay.
excrete the rest, right? Something along those lines. Yeah, it's not, that tap water is not ideal no matter what. So I wouldn't say that adding a couple of minerals is all of a sudden going to transform that tap water into a really great source. So sip on it. For me too, I don't necessarily recommend drinking a ton of water during meals per se, because the absorption happens better on an empty stomach. And so really, if you're going out to a restaurant heading to eat, you do want to have a glass of water from home. You know, let's say again, 10 ounces to 300 milliliters of water, about 30 to 60 minutes prior to that meal, of the best of the water that you're transforming into a higher quality water. Because what that does is that actually provides the hydration to create a better mucus lining in the gut. And then the stomach can start to make more acid, safely make more acid to help you digest your food. Right. And so it's a really great strategy to get into. If you can maybe have that, like say, okay, about 60 minutes to 30 to 60 minutes prior to my meal, that's when I'm hydrating. And during my meal, if I want a couple of sips, fine, but it's not a main source of hydration. So we purify it as best as we can. We add just a little bit of minerals into it. And there's 2 types of minerals we can add. We can add ocean-based minerals, like I talked about, but we can also add land-based minerals. That would be things like fulvic or humic minerals. You can definitely add those as well. And then the next step would be doing something that structures the water, right? Gives the water back the hexagonal arrangement, if you will, if we were to do Veda's technique or Massaro's technique.
Okay.
And so and there's a lot of ways that we can add structure. The thing to know about this is that when water is pushed through municipal taps and when it's pushed through an RO filter, right? The water molecules lack that structure. They would look really amorphous if we were to do Veda's technique.
Mm-hmm.
However, we can do things from actually using a device. There are devices that can help us structure our water. We can use intention. We can use natural earth frequencies. We can do something that will impart that will give information to that water, that the water says, oh, okay, I'll hold that information. I'll structure and organize myself to hold that information. And that information, as long as it's, you know, coherent, compassionate information, if you will, it's going to be a beautiful structure. It's going to go back into those more crystalline like configurations. And so that could be as simple as prayer or gratitude. That's such an underrated thing when it comes to the water and to our food. Gratitude, right? I feel like every culture around the planet would give thanks for the water that we received, for the rainfall, for this animal, for this fruit, for this. And we've just, and I'm going to guarantee you, if I were to poll anybody who would have the knowledge of this, I'm going to guarantee you that they weren't grateful for it just because it was going to give sustenance. They were literally giving gratitude to it because they knew it would actually transform how well that energy was then received by their body and the energetic quality of what they were consuming. And so that's what we can do. We can just say some gratitude or a prayer before we eat, before we drink our water. And that will, as we've seen with Veda and with Massaro's work, provide structure to that water. That's through thoughts, feelings, intention. There are devices, right? Devices, I would say, are the gateway into ultimately recognizing our own ability to do this with our intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be something like the Andeea wand, right? Andeea is a company that has put coherent, really highly structured spring water into a glass wand, a wand made out of quartz crystal glass that allows all of the frequencies that are in this water to leave through the glass and then go into the water. So I would basically stir the water that I'm drinking, and through this process called entrainment, basically this water is entraining that water to have structure. And so they've got a lot of great information on their website at Andeea. And then lastly, you've got like vortexing the water. So simply swirling the water. Interestingly, I've seen research where simply swirling the water gives it a little structure. And then there are devices you could use to actually vortex the water, which one of my favorites is from a company called MEA Water, where basically you connect a bottle, a bottle full of your, purified, remineralized water, and they've got a little connector at the top, and you put an empty bottle on the top. There's like a two-way connector, and in this vortexer, there's a big magnet inside of it. You flip the bottle over so that the bottle full of water is on the top, and you swirl it a couple of times, and you see this vortex, and the vortex takes on the shape of a double helix of DNA. It's the coolest thing ever.
Whoa.
See the double helix appear, which means that's how water deeply resonates with our DNA and vice versa. And so that being said, like you'll do that a couple of times as well. Technically with that one, you would do that 4 times. And now you've got this beautifully structured water that you can drink as well. So there's fun
also
ways to
negatively charged water, because I heard you talk about Robert Gourlay on another podcast, and that is
Robert.
Definitely my next fun device that I'm going to get for my water. But I'm really happy you talked about structuring it in a way of giving it intention, because I want people to know that, as fun as these structuring devices are and whatnot, like some of them are costly and not everybody can afford that, but putting the intention in your water does work, and it is meaningful. And yeah, so thanks for mentioning all the layers there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like, so one of my favorite things about quantum health is certainly I could spend 10 grand on a sauna if I wanted to,
Right.
but I could get sunlight for free, right? I can spend, those structuring devices are a few $100s, or I could hold gratitude in my heart, right? I mean, so like there's always a very easy and free way to do these things that I hope people take advantage of. So I love the fact that this is accessible. One of the coolest bits of feedback that I got, and I don't know, were the two of you at the graduation, the QBC graduation?
I was.
That one of the coolest things was hearing Vidya from Indonesia, right, talk about how what she loves about the tools in that she's learned in quantum biology is that they're free. And she deals with a lot of people who have no extra resources to buy anything, but to know that she can teach them about earthing, and she can teach them about sunlight on their skin, and she can teach them about creating a dark house at night, and all of these things that are free, using intention, right, to help structure the water inside of your bodies and in the water that we drink. I mean, amazing that this type of stuff can work for people regardless of what their budget is, and where they are in the world. It's one of my favorite things about quantum biology.
Carrie, just a question on that before we sum up, because I know you're a busy lady.
We got a few more minutes.
Yeah, we're not too much time. But on the free stuff, going back, so we kind of covered the water that we take, but if we go to the water that we make, how cold therapy is free. Doing some cold therapy, how does that help us hydrate?
Oh, it absolutely can. So I'll talk. Yeah, cold therapy can. Interestingly, I've got clients who are in places like Saudi Arabia, and they don't have cold water in the middle of summer. So not everyone has cold. But that being said, if you have access to cold, yes, you can. When you get cold, your body has to heat you up. And as your body heats you up, it's specifically your mitochondria heat you up. And when they do that, they're making their own infrared light inside of you. And so they're helping to structure that exclusion zone water for you. And the more exclusion zone water that you have in your mitochondria between where they funnel electrons, the better able they are to make water. So yeah, that's key there. But if you don't have access to cold, you will have access to natural light. And that natural light, that sunlight, contains red and near infrared wavelengths. And that also helps the mitochondria become much more efficient at making water. And so while being indoors kind of devoid of those wavelengths, or having less of those wavelengths and being dominant in the blue, those can inhibit that water production. Going outside and getting that light on your skin can help facilitate it.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then I guess to finish, what would be the biggest dehydrators? Because I know that Andeea really wants, I was hoping you're going to mention one that's in the quantum recovery space, but what are the big dehydrators for our health?
Yeah, the ones that so there's several, but the ones that I think are pervasive these days that a lot of people aren't even aware of would be the non-native EMFs from things like wireless devices. So anything that is wireless or Bluetooth, all of those things emit the frequencies that actually not only affect our ability to make water inside of our mitochondria, but literally they deplete our exclusion zone water. And so they're shrinking that battery for us.
Okay.
So that's something that I think is not really well respected these days, but I hope people are hearing this. And it's not about, again, not using your cell phone ever, but it's about understanding how frequently you use it, in what proximity. So do you have the phone on airplane mode? Because when you disable the cell phone and the wireless data, when you disable those signals and you download something, you can still listen to a podcast or watch a TV show, but you won't be getting the radiation that we're talking about that can cause that dehydrating effect. So being indoors around those non-native EMFs and then under artificial blue light, that also will cause a dehydrating effect. Yeah.
I'll let Andeea ask the question.
Oh, just things like caffeine and alcohol and
100%.
any
Sugar?
substances really that we're putting in our body. And I have not done this yet, but I want to dig into the research about how each different drug that people can get addicted to, these, like I'm talking about methamphetamines, opiates, benzodiazepines, and how that affects the cell. And really, it's obviously disrupting our mitochondria. So when someone's coming into recovery, their mitochondria have really went through it. And so these things that we're talking about on all these podcasts and today with the water, all of these pieces and the light especially are just so critical in somebody's especially early stages of recovery, because it can help alleviate their post-acute withdrawal syndromes. But and alcohol is also
diuretic.
It's the biggest electron thief, and we don't really have time to dive into it today, but we all know that those are also dehydrating. Carrie, we want to ask you one more question, our last question of the day. What does quantum healthy mean to you?
Quantum healthy basically means understanding how we can connect back to nature to heal and thrive, right? It's not about a complex supplement protocol or diet regime, even though those can be beneficial for people, but it's about recognizing that our bodies are in unnatural living environments these days. And the more we can go into nature and connect to the earth, connect to the sunlight, even to the sounds, right? That you'll hear, from bird song to crickets chirping. All of that actually is biologically impactful and moving our body more towards what we call homeostasis, or back into alignment, back into health. And so when we connect with that, we get back into alignment. The more we divorce ourselves from that, the further out of alignment we go. And then one layer further is, like we alluded to already, is that it's not just me, right? We are all connected. And so the way that I take care of my own health can actually enhance the health of other people around me, can enhance the health of other people I'm thinking about, right? So it's just this idea of, yes, you may be one person, but you have such a profound impact on not only you, but also the potential to heal those around you as well.
Oh, what a beautiful way to give service too.
Totally, right?
I was just thinking as you said this, that modern life is like a bad marriage.
Divorce.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be on our podcast, Carrie. This is going to be, I'm so excited to share this with everyone. And yeah, we'll see you all next time on Quantum Healthy Podcast.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. We hope you found some value in this information. And if you feel inspired, please share it and leave us a 5-star review. This will help us reach so many more people. If you want to connect with Laura, you can find her at laurakissmannwellness.com and Andeea at andeearay.com. Links are below in the show notes. Now, go find some sunlight and embrace your own quantum healthy.